Yep.
Yeah.
I will check just before I leave,
I appreciate
make sure it's working.
appreciate the help.
Text.
Nice job, Beth. Nice job.
I can press,
Finish your midterm breaks.
Oh, yeah, we do tonight, 11:30.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing right after this meeting.
Yeah.
We found we bring that stress upon ourselves by leaving things
Oh, I
always in the last
know, I
minute.
can remember.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. You're just too much in the middle of doing everything to stop for that kind of technicality. And you know, in my case, I used to have a grade program that always had everything done. It was just that I wanted to enter, you know, as much as possible before.
How'd your deck come out?
Yeah.
And so-
It's just about finished. Pretty well.
We're gonna just wait a couple more minutes just to see, we will not have Lauren with us tonight, but, look, Water Ritsema may come, you know, he probably has to leave work and get over here, so. And I think, Ethan's going to get a couple things up on the screen for us to look at as soon as he does that.
Nice.
We'll call the
Really got
meeting
the
to order.
rhythm?
Whoopsie.
How's your project going?
We're in the bedroom. We 7 weeks to do tile.
Gee, I hope
That
that
way it's
doesn't
done and it doesn't leak. My wife is very happy. I'm happy.
Check on that.
Can you tell
I
me
don't want to say it's
call
perfect,
It-
but it's
I don't
pretty
think I
close,
have
you
him
know.
listed
And
It's gonna kind of be nice to
as a
have
caller.
a project
Just
like
have the
that
same
where
If you're waiting for him anyway, you may as well call him back.
you'd like it to be done
Okay, I don't know if
sooner
that's
rather
him
than
though.
later, but you kind of have the luxury of
yeah,
it's completely almost detached and you can go work.
well, we're in it now.
Yeah,
That's- yeah.
But I mean, initially, that's
Yeah,
gotta be-
and we had the doors, the windows, everything, and
Oh,
it's-
hi.
it's
I
tied in
I
now.
couldn't
and
take your call. It's Rochelle Armstrong, and I'm in the middle of a meeting,
We
and I
gotta
was
do the
just checking
siding,
to see
which
if this
probably
was
won't
someone
be
who was
until
supposed to
spring.
come to the meeting.
I might have to amend my permit thing. I think she wanted to do the whole house, but we'll see how that goes. I gotta-
Yeah.
I have a habit of prolonging projects like that, so when we had a
Yeah.
2-month-old.
Well, I'll have to call you back because I'm in the middle of a meeting, and so I will. Thank you. Bye. That was a
My
mistake.
wife, her father
Catwalk
is one of those guys
complaint.
who has all kinds of energy and starts a project and rolls right through it. It's done in no time, so she's used to that.
No,
And her aunt's husband is one of those, they built the house like 7 or 8 years ago and there's still a million things not done, so she like has a complex about it almost, so I need to
Right.
buckle down
Then,
and get into something.
What are we, we're just, okay.
That's, I guess, I mean, we don't even have a quorum, do we? I mean, not that it really matters, I mean, we can still talk.
Well, maybe I'm only mayor, or I'm only,
I mean, I don't really think if we had anything too official.
What did we set? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think that may be what we set. Sorry to say, I don't have that right off the top of my head. Four. So we have 4 members. Right, so I'll call the meeting to order then. And I'll make a note that we have a couple of absences. So thank you for coming, for those who are here. I did send you a list of the, just a portion of those actions that we took a look at last week, and those will count as minutes. Of course, in addition to whatever comments we made, I also included for at least 19 of those 30 actions, the requirements for them. Which I will continue to build up to the 30. I just didn't get a chance to do that. So you have copies of those, and as they stand, if you've had a chance to look at them, maybe we could approve those as minutes.
okay with that?
You guys, okay,
Yes.
so they're approved. Very good. So, trying to move forward and thinking of a way in which we might kind of expedite the completion of some of these actions. The mayor, Ethan, and I met together this week and, discussed that. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to ask Ethan just to kind of summarize some of the PE3 actions that we're going to try to move forward. And I'll just ask for general comments, Ethan.
Yeah, so, I mean, as we talked about in past meetings and Rochelle's past information, there's certain tasks that we've already started work on. It's just a general city operation, so it's just a matter of reaching out and to the various departments such as Joel, like the MLD with some of the LED lighting, and some other departments about work that's already been done, and we can start gathering that information and just upload that onto the website and over the Climate Smart Communities portal, and then just start getting the points and registering those activities.
Right.
So
So that, in the discussion of those actions, Ethan expressed willingness to be the kind of outreach person to whatever departments might be involved in the PE3 portion of the action checklist, which is all about decreasing energy use. So that will be ongoing, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more concrete news to report at our next meeting. I can go on to say that there was some kind of question as to what, did you need to comment about anything? Sorry. I did, question whether there would be enough hands on deck to accomplish some of the goals that are included in this checklist. And I was very much interested in trying to get a little bit more community involvement. And as you know, Lauren Eastwood is a member of what used to be called the Climate Smart Communities Action Coalition, and the name has been shortened to the Climate Action Coalition. So we have a liaison on the committee, but hadn't gotten a great degree of buy-in from that body to actually contribute with some service. But they took a formal vote last week, and they are on board and have identified some goals that they'd like to see put forward. And I added those to the end of that list. Most of them have to do with community engagement, which is listed under Inform and Inspire the Public, PE9. In looking at the requirements that have to do with that section, it'll take initiative from the city to be the lead agency to do all that. But for example, in running some kind of workshop or whatever, the city can be the lead agency, but then we would need many volunteers to present information, let's say in a little conference that we had on how to save energy or how to recycle or whatever. And these people are very experienced with that. That's what they've been doing already. And this coalition includes people from Women's League of Voters. They include people from the Climate Reality Project, the Environmental Action Committee from the college. And we hope to grow that coalition. and if they've committed themselves and made part of their mission to help this task force as we move forward towards certification. So I think that's a really significant step to have taken. But the proof is in the pudding, as we need to now figure out exactly what actions we're going to be working on and what role that those group of volunteers can play.
To get
Exactly.
that going, and you know me, set a ambitious goal and then just go for it. You know, what if 2 months from now the city sponsors a workshop upstairs in the auditorium, and we can present something on heat pumps and something on solar power and something on electric vehicles and et cetera. The students from the high school, I bet you they'd like to do some sessions. I'm sure they'd come up with a couple.
Mhm.
I know we, within the city, with our expertise, we can come up with probably at least 3.
Right.
And we could probably fill up a good 8-hour workshop on a Saturday in 2 months, and just, instead of trying to work so hard to figure out a date to coordinate with all these various groups, let's just set a date, say
Well,
the
that-
city's gonna go off and do this, please help.
That's right. I mean, and that's, in effect, what I was saying. We're gonna have to be the initiators and they can be the helpers.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was one of the ideas actually the mayor put out there for Ethan and I to be considering, and yeah, let's do it.
Good.
Let's do it. I did speak to the Saranac Lake Task Force Coordinator, Erin Griffin, and was just kind of comparing notes with her. And she and I were talking about the best practices, the ways to organize that really work. And you know, their task force is organized a little bit differently and is comprised of people, more stakeholders from the community. And then I described to her how we've kind of got a two entities that are working toward the same goal. And but that's a kind of segue into the next item, which is how can we, as a task force, perhaps dig into a more specific and help out with more specific actions, because her task force does things like, you know, in trying to figure out the greenhouse gas inventory, which they decided to do on their own. They realized, for example, how they had to calculate the square footage of every single office in every single building in order to make those calculations. And that's where, you know, kind of delegating responsibilities and figuring out, you know, how and if anybody could pitch in, how that works. So that leads me to, as I mentioned in my rather, maybe it was more of a lament than an email, but trying to figure out where we can begin with some actions that we might, and this is just a might, be able to recruit some help from you guys with. So we've got a couple of ideas, and I'd like to turn your attention to the first set of handouts past the minutes, which is the environmentally preferable purchasing policy. And, you know, I had summarized the requirements for those in the minutes, but if you want to take a look at that, you can see that the idea is to create some standards around the bulleted items under B, and to write policies, and in this case it would be an addendum to a procurement policy that we just recently passed that has some very broad language in it covering, you know, environmentally responsible goals. But an addendum to that procurement policy would then ensure that we're covering more specifically and making recommendations to our departments that that lead to actual change in practice and the kinds of products that we purchase. So if you could just flip over to the back, you can see that the points that you receive, if you address these 4 general areas that you include in your procurement policy: efficiency standards for energy, recycled material standards, locally produced organic goods standards, forest stewardship standards, and so forth. And then it goes on to state what you have to document in order to do that. I have an example. I did go ahead, Ethan, and give everyone Water Villet's procurement policy. And they've already received their point, so it's the next document in your packet. They've already developed their procurement policy, that's green procurement policy. And so I've included that for your review at some point. But in going forward, Ethan and I decided to ask you for some help, and perhaps over the course of the next month, we can review policies like these and kind of get together very specific ideas about what we could include in our own. Ethan, you want to add anything to what I'm saying here?
As Rochelle said, the procurement policy the city just recently passed. It does have, some good language referring to environmentally friendly practices. What the climate smart community would be looking for was a little bit more specific language about those 4 categories that Rochelle had read off. That's on the back of that page. So the energy efficiency standards, recycled materials. So essentially what we're looking for is that addendum. And the question is, we don't really need to necessarily reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of policies from that she had printed off, or that's also in the other climate smart communities or other areas such as Sacramento that we can use for inspiration. And so just really what we're hoping is, we could have some people, if they have the time or ability to, volunteer and research it, whether it's a specific component, research some part of the component of, let's say, the Ford stewardship standards. And then what we can do is combine that into a general policy addendum that could be reviewed by the Common Council and
Right.
ultimately adopted.
And
that could
in
just
the
help.
process, maybe we could just ask the mayor, for anything that you foresee that would need to be kind of vetted and run through at the department level, since it would probably mean a pretty significant change in practice if they were to have to conform to these kinds of standards. In terms of process, what do you
Well,
recommend?
I think if we just make them as guidelines at first,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's easier, and then just have a little bit of a transition to then develop
Okay.
the standards.
Yeah, that's, so essentially in the current procurement policies, it has some, they talk about conserving natural resources, reducing or purchasing certain items that are environmentally friendly, and the guidelines could just describe and for locally produced organic goods, what that means, and, some of the standards that would be required through
So
this program.
I mean, I know what that means, but what does that mean for the city? How, do we purchase a lot of food products? I mean, purchasing organics, what do we buy for?
Well,
food?
that one, since it's probably, unless we were to sponsor
We don't
an
run any food
event.
services.
Right, unless
So
we were to
it
sponsor an
seems pretty
event.
simple to say, it doesn't seem complicated.
No,
But more broadly, we've been talking about, when we make any procurement, make sure it's environmentally sustainable, and at least that should be a factor in our decision making. It's not a mandatory factor,
Yeah.
but in our existing policies, that should be a factor, but we haven't fleshed it out in more detail. So I think you've got a broader idea than just organics and composting and recycling and stuff, but more just having a
So,
green
is there anything
green hat on
wrong with
whatever
it?
you're procuring in general.
Just the initial.
it just says here in the Waterville, environmentally preferable purchasing is an important component of the city's procurement policy and shall guide city's efforts to meet these goals. So,
There's other cities like Ithaca that, they break down the different components in a little bit more detail. Nothing that's really handcuffing the city to a certain behavior, but it's just good guidelines, environmentally friendly practices for us to move forward. And since there's nothing, that addendum and that kind of detail really fleshed out, this is something that we benefit the city moving forward, and it could just help accomplish some goals in the short term, because as we may remember, we did apply for some grant funding to help with the greenhouse gas inventory for the city operations. So we're gonna probably hear about that in around December. And so that will, once we hear about that, whether we get it or not, that'll help dictate some of the next steps in the next meetings. So this is something that I think that would be easy to accomplish in the meantime, this next month, that we could, work, whether we, communicate through email. We don't have to necessarily just save it all till next December or November. something that we can, you know, do some work and then meet up and then talk about the policy and flush it out a little bit more and then
Right.
pass that forward to whether the department review or however the, you know, the mayor and the council wanna move forward with that.
You know, and for those of you who are in departments, we've got the advantage of having two people in departments. If, you know, you might have a chance to talk to your department head about what these kinds of changes might mean for your department and how easily you might adapt to some kind of, you know, following some kind of standards. And that would be a significant contribution, just to kind of as a test of, you know, a department's receptivity to these and whatever bearing it might have on your budget.
Just going through
I'm sorry.
the toxic reduction and pollution on the top of page 4.
Like, if we don't, and once again, this is.
Top
Just,
of page
look at it.
4.
Each city's its own each city. We don't need to just, we're not copying and pasting one cities or the others. What we're gonna be trying to do is make
Item
one for
4,
Plattsburgh.
the very first sentence.
Purchase of pentachlorophenol. How do you say that?
Creosote treated wood shall be avoided wherever
Yeah.
possible.
So there's things like that.
That's
yeah.
our poles.
There you go. There you go.
So we're not pen poles.
Your eyes gravitated to that, right? I wonder what the alternative is, right?
Concrete,
Poles?
Yeah.
Wow, gosh, yeah.
but
At a
and you look-
significant increase in cost, yeah,
developing that further, what's the carbon footprint of that?
of concrete versus wood.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So it's, okay, we gotta go through it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not just this example, there's other examples that we can find and just figuring out what we need to, what fits for Plattsburgh and what can address
Yeah.
those general goals as general guidelines, because each city's a little different and we have, you know, that's something that we need to continue with your department's operations, so it's just something that we'll have to, that's why we just figured this is something good that we could, you know, work over the next month or so and, you know, use other people who can, you know, have maybe some different point of views and we're able to do some different research on different categories of this and we can bring it all together.
Of course, and that's
synthesize that.
that's as we go forward with pursuing, you know, moving other action items along.
So in this next month, are we simply just trying to compile a list of things that we should be immediately concerned with?
No, in this case, we're just getting your input on this particular kind of policy. That's the only homework that, well, no, there's one more that Ethan's gonna introduce about the website, but you may not have much to contribute to that except just to read the idea. And if
So
any of
can-
you,
Can I just,
Sure.
so, because I get concrete, so our goal over the next month is to imagine what our version of a green procurement policy.
Right.
Or an addendum to our purchasing
Exactly.
policy would look like.
exactly, and if any of you are kind of extra motivated, I do have Sacramento, California's, we've got, so that would give you Waterville's and Sacramento's policy to take a look at to see, you know, whether there's anything that could be extracted from it. So I'll leave that here for anybody to pick up who might want to. And, you know, my kind of another aspect of this is, you know, the question of how can we introduce to the community at large, other institutions, other businesses, the idea that they might be looking at this as a practice of their own, you know? I mean,
Well,
maybe
There may be
maybe
other
somebody
business-
like Wouter Rietzema might go to the hospital and say, hey,
They might be already doing it.
maybe you are.
For new construction, when we put in proposals, CONs or grant proposals, your grants get better consideration if you included some of these concepts in your proposals. So, do I know if we have a purchasing policy related to this? I don't know.
Yeah,
We have policies for just about everything, but that's not my world.
yeah.
So I can find out if we have anything like that, but I don't know.
Okay. So there's the general idea, and what comes of it over the course of the next month will be for you just to study, perhaps if you have, 30 minutes here and there, investigate. And Ethan, did you want to show them how you can look at the Climate Smart Communities
Yeah.
website and pull down what other Climate Smart communities are doing? We gave you Waterville as an example, but
So one thing you can do is when you're actually at the Climate Smart Communities page, you see this map. You can click on this, and what it's going to do is show you all the registered, certified, and action complete communities. So all the blue ones, such as us, we're registered. We need to, before we're certified, whether it's bronze or silver, that's what the points, as part of the points. So what you could do is scroll and here's Broome County, and you can go to view report. And so everything that any of these communities we ultimately do, that we submit, it's all public domain. It's all going to be publicly available information. So, for example, for them to become bronze certified, these are the tasks that they had submitted. So you can see, their minutes. You can see how they form their coordinator position, and different cities have, they have 2 points here for an environmental preferable purchasing policy. So, as an example, we talked about Waterville and Sacramento, but there's other cities, and not necessarily one's a gold standard. It's just there might be components of one that we like and another that we like if this actually opens.
did you just click on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like you see this is 86 pages. So that's, yeah, so that's, they talk about this, a lot of this is probably their normal purchasing policy with a small addendum. You have another, I think Ithaca, I like Ithaca's example. I can scroll over there, but there's others that are shorter, a little bit more succinct. Where it's a little bit more.
Good gosh, you go
manageable.
fast.
But so that's what we can do with part of the research, whether it's just using normal Google search, or if you know other municipalities that have good procedures or good policies. That's something that, or if you've heard a friend, or so you've heard through business that some department or some department in, let's say, St. Lawrence County, they do a certain kind of purchasing policy, or they behave a certain way. It might be interesting to see what they do. So that kind of research could be valuable, and we could take what we like from there and what we don't like, ignore that, and then combine it and form our own procurement policy. But so here's an example of Ithaca's environmental one. It's 10 pages, a little more straightforward, but it breaks down the components a little bit more. It's nothing too crazy. So if we just get the general policy of what we're looking for, the general guidelines, I don't really think synthesizing and writing it up is going to be, an overwhelming task for us.
So for now, we're more or less gonna highlight sections of these other.
Just,
Yeah.
yes,
Areas
that
that
you believe are
would be impactful for
good
us.
to include.
Yeah.
And then for you two, if you don't mind taking that extra step to kind of think about it in terms of how it would affect your department.
Because of our shared services with Clinton County and the stores there, do they have a
That's a good
environmental?
question. Yeah, we should see if they've got a
Okay.
procurement policy.
And so the stuff like those connections that we're going to have to obviously, and that's why it's part of the guidelines, because it's going to be tough. It's not just going to, we have those shared services with the county, and there might be times where we can't just say it has to be exactly this way. So
Mhm.
And just thinking in terms of process, it might be, I'm trying to think about how, in what manner we'll report out, and then what the next step would be. So then, you might bring your recommendations and your observations about what you've researched to the next meeting, and then it would be up to me, and hopefully Ethan, with Ethan's help, we compile them and sort through them and come up with the best recommendations.
So that's I think that's the general plan for at least this task, and I think it gives us something that we can focus on and make concrete moves while those other tasks that we've discussed before, that some of the departments are already working on. That's it's not as directly involved with this task force.
Right.
And then in the meantime, as we wait for hearing back from the grant and as well as the mayor's idea with the having that workshop upstairs and inviting other community groups to participate. I think that could be another thing that we could work on as well.
The way that this currently exists does that not meet? No, okay, so, if, like the mayor had mentioned, if we did it like a set of guidelines, would that meet the
Yeah.
criteria?
We
Thank
just
you.
append it onto our policy really easily.
I think that might be the best way to do it initially, because some people are gonna have a little bit harder time getting on board.
Right. Maybe even as you set up that addendum and the guidelines, set a target date for
Yeah.
making it strict policy, you know, I mean, they'll naturally, with any kind of big change like that, you have to build in some transition time, as people, get familiar with what their new choices are, and, you know, you've got certain inventory you use you've got a backlog of, right? So, just setting target dates, I think, would help with that too.
Well, and you know, if you read the water delete one here, I mean, you know, there's lots of caveats. You know, you can't buy green products if they cost double
Right.
what the money you have. I mean,
Right.
That's right.
it's a factor to be considered. So, you know, the timelines are really around, you know, putting in place, you know, procedures so that when you evaluate what you're gonna buy, that is a factor to be considered. It can't be the only factor.
Right.
It'd be nice if there was a simple formula to sort of evaluate effectiveness and cost and sustainability all in one, but it's probably not the case.
That's coming. That's down the pike. That'll happen.
You wanna make it?
Besides that, eventually the state will come around to, you know, I think stronger mandates about this. If you consider things like their plan to eliminate single-use plastic bags, I mean, that's coming next March. So, you know, not that we buy bags, but that's just an example of how the state has a particular direction that it's gonna take too that will affect municipalities. So, okay, so everybody's clear on what we're trying to get at for next month regarding an environmentally preferable procurement policy. And then Ethan, if you wouldn't mind going on in the last sheet in your packet is, this is an idea that came from the Climate Action Committee, and that was for the development of a city website. So, do you mind?
Yeah, so, I mean, just like with any organization, something that's important is for part of the outreach is to have a website of sorts to communicate the ideas and not what just our community, what our group is doing, but what other initiatives in the area may be, and other information that, you know, residents, business owners, et cetera, can utilize. So one of the things that another short, easy thing that we can accomplish is just creating our own website, which would really just be a page on the current city's website, which we can update and we can put essentially whatever we want on it. So another thing is for us to consider is exactly what we want on it. Other cities, you know, they use some of the guidelines as an examples of their initiatives. So let's say they want to reduce some kind of purchasing by 10%. That'll be their main thing on their site. For us right now, you know, it's about our task force. It's going to be about some of the work we're doing, some of the work we're going to be doing, but we can also include a lot of information regarding, you know, the general environmental conditions. So I know Rochelle has some information with everyone else here that, you know, there might be other information that we feel that's relevant to have as an educating tool in the short term.
Right.
And this is something that will be obviously being updated continually, but it's something that, once again, it's lower hanging fruit, but it's just something that the task force and as we move forward just will need. And it does accomplish one of the climate smart communities goals as well of having that website too. So it's another thing that we can do to move forward and become a registered community, as well as accomplish these some good goals. of just
And you know,
outreach.
the thing is, we don't necessarily, and especially since we're down some staff, have the resources at our disposal to kind of do the inputting for this, and I'm just wondering, is it possible to allow motivated volunteers?
We've already got some of this. Take a look at the city website.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, Beth had started a page as
Right.
an example, so she had put some information, and it's just, so what we can do is just really flesh it out, add much more if we wanna put links to certain, documents, links to reports, links to work that we've done, links, et cetera, or just, and if, at some point when we, we have, let's say, that workshop, we can advertise on there, and we can do
Right.
other activities on that site.
But,
And you can get to that right from one click from our main page too, so it's pretty accessible.
so what my question was, for example, if you say, features,
Go right down the bottom.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, so-
Climate action.
Yeah, so right now it's a blank slate, a lot of text, and it's so, but so it's
There's another one too. Go back. And then the two notches above, you see climate
Oh, yeah.
action.
You can change the emergency alert.
yeah, need to do that.
But so this is just something that we as like a group can consider is how we're gonna make adjustments to the website to easily display information and initiatives for the
So
community.
I'm just trying to think in terms of what a volunteer could do. So there are some like bulleted items on this, and I can foresee people on the Climate Action Coalition saying, okay, I'll send you a bunch of links to local, state, and national resources related to climate change, and then those could be incorporated,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and Beth did this one, so she's willing to do that.
Yeah. And
Okay.
And I think Ethan
yeah, and I have
can do it
access
too.
to editing the website as well, so.
Right.
So there's some limitations with our program that we have, but we can still do, a good job of expressing our information and activities. So, it's just another so there might be examples of other communities where you've seen interesting websites or interesting ways people display information, and that might be something worthwhile to pursue to see if we can obtain that.
And it
Right.
might be an easy way to put some of the goals that are required for the task force to put on there, and then as we achieve them, you can check them off.
Right.
And just, I'm looking at the LED streetlights. I can give you an approximate total of how many we have and how many
Yeah.
we've done, and every month we can.
So then
update.
that can
Little
be
dashboard,
reported.
yeah.
Just, and just, so this is, we're slowly ticking away at it, and
Right.
the Saranac River cleanup, if they would share the information, how many tons of sludge do they think there is? How many tons have they taken out over the last, 10
Let's
years.
cover, yeah.
and it's just, you can see how the city of Plattsburgh is getting cleaned up.
And that's like the whole point of these, is just for that
Just,
public information outreach, so.
And then even Public Works, how many tons of recyclables do they collect a
Yeah.
week? Some just little statistics.
Yeah, I think
Almost
that's,
kind of be cool to have a counter.
Right, there it is.
and that.
And the videos of these meetings and the minutes can all go on there, the agendas, a little calendar of dates can all go on there so easily.
Right.
If there was
So I think we can populate pretty easily.
maybe a section where local businesses could, post a video saying the changes that they've made, and they'd
Oh.
get, they'd
There you
get
go.
the
Highlight
free, they'd get the
business
free,
of the month or
free
something.
publicity, and
Yeah.
it would just be added content. I think that's very
Come
No,
nice.
check-
that's
come
all
check
these
out
kind of
our
ideas, and that's
LED
what
lights
we're
on the
looking for
layout.
with this, is just to see
Yeah.
how we can improve.
Linkers
Also,
to great
so
articles
we
Mackenzie's
change
gonna
over to
write
all
on
pages
this.
that
Yep,
Come down and
check it out.
have dinner.
But that's, once again, just something that will be ongoing efforts of updating, especially if we add these new statistics or maps as we progress. But it's another thing that we can just do to, make some quick action and
Mhm.
then make some forward progress.
I think that quick action creates a sense of momentum, and then it makes all this a lot easier to sustain and get going. Because we're doing a lot already, it's just not that many people know we're doing a lot,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
By the way, I just emailed you 12 topics for a workshop for December, and just really easy to just put the stuff together, and we could all brainstorm and come up with a number of names for each of those topics who could
That's
very
right.
easily present, so this isn't very difficult to do, it's just a matter of just getting that train up on the tracks and going at a little speed.
There you go. So we'll meet with you on Monday about that, right? Okay.
So this is just, start pushing the rock and start moving, and we'll just, it'll keep
No, it's
going.
not gonna roll back down, is it? Like
No, we're too
Sisyphus?
strong.
Okay.
No, that was reserved for, can't recall my Greek mythology, who was that?
Sisyphus,
Is that right?
yeah. Yeah, whatever. Okay.
Cool.
A little bit of a short meeting tonight. Anything else you want to talk about before we set our next date?
That's why you guys.
You like short meetings, don't you?
We packed a lot into a short amount of time.
Yeah, it feels like it was a busy.
Okay, so what should we do for our next meeting then?
Plan for the workshop, it'll only be a month and less than a month away next meeting.
Right.
So I think between now and the next time we meet, we'll obviously be doing hopefully some correspondence,
Yeah.
email, or if we, need to set up any other additional meetings. It doesn't have to be anything as necessarily as formal as this, but, we are gonna have to, some communication will be beneficial, just to move everything forward.
Yeah,
That's
if
just
you hit
obviously-
on something between now and then,
Yeah.
as you peruse the procurement policies or you check out websites, yeah, feel free to email me and Ethan and,
Or the whole group, and we can
Or
just
the
keep a
whole
chain,
group,
and,
yeah.
we can just keep that going, so.
right, exactly. So do you want to meet, if we're keeping up our Wednesday, do you want to meet on the 20th of November?
I'd recommend earlier, because
Earlier?
if we do try to do a workshop in December, probably want to
Okay.
have more lead
How the
time.
13th?
Sure.
Okay.
And we can, yeah,
4:00?
4:00.
That's free on my calendar, just with the caveat that we're going live with a new information system that week, and I may not be able to sneak away.
Okay.
And that will last for the week after too. It's a
All
fairly
right.
large thing. so.
Good luck with that, Wilder. Yeah, but, your input, when you can put it
No,
out
I mean,
there, is fine.
It's open on my calendar.
Okay,
If things are going along reasonably okay, I'll be here.
all right. Okay, if there's anything else,
So
oh,
4 o'clock, is it 4 o'clock?
4:00, yeah. And I introduced, we haven't had so far a citizen come to our meeting, and I think it's worth acknowledging the fact that we have someone in our audience. This is Tom Cosgrove, who just moved back to the area. He grew up here. He's an environmental engineer, and so he's obviously got some interest in the kinds of things we're doing. And I think he's going to be a willing volunteer along the way. He said so much, so thank you for coming, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Having to be a fly on the wall.
Can we ask some questions?
Yeah,
Do you have a purchasing policy that you're?
we could, I can look at what my company has, because we probably have some kind of purchasing policy, already within our organization. So I work for an environmental, engineering consulting firm. We help large utilities run energy efficiency programs. So the one that I primarily work on is in Pennsylvania, back from where I moved from. But it would be the same if we did something for NYSEG or something similar for that. And so I'm sure we have some kind of green procurement policy, and if I can find one, I'll certainly send it along. I am also of the opinion that if you can find something in the 10-page variety, yes, in the
So
86.
I prefer 5.
5 is even better,
For one.
exactly.
Policies, the shorter the better.
Shorter the better, make it,
Always.
simpler to understand, simpler to implement,
Yep.
so.
I'm
And Tom-
totally with you. In fact,
If
I'm
you
gonna
give me
go
your
through that website and look for the shortest one that got 4 points.
Right, exactly. It's not a bad-
I've got your email, so I'll bring you into the loop of
Yeah,
the coalition communication.
yeah, absolutely. So, my background is in facility assessments and helping facilities save energy, specifically electricity. That's basically all that our company does. And grad school way back when did greenhouse gas emission inventories and a number of other things. But read about the task force and said, hey, that's what I already do. And I'm happy to help, but not trying to interject. Just
Well,
Expertise is welcome.
We're
Yeah.
pursuing both of those right now, as you may know. The IEP, we're just going to do an energy audit
Mhm.
for our buildings, and then
That's
we're
great.
getting a grant for greenhouse gas and
We hope.
Excellent.
inventory as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. Yeah, I'm happy to, add any help if needed. It sounds like you guys are off to a running start, and that's great. So,
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming, Tom.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so 4 o'clock on the 13th, which is just about a month, and we'll look forward to hearing from you between now and then. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Any idea that pops into your head that we didn't cover, just let me know. Tom, here.
We have to